The race for statewide office. Tonight, Republican gubernatorial candidate Bob McDonnell. This is What Matters.
Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. We continue our one-on-one conversations with the candidates running for statewide office, campaigning for your vote this November. And we are glad to have with us tonight Republican gubernatorial candidate Bob McDonnell. Nice to see you.
Great to be back in the old home of Hampton Roads, Cathy. Thanks.
I understand that you are traveling around the state in a blue 8-seat Winnebago. I'm trying to picture that.
8-seat and 1 bed. We call it the trampoline. It doesn't have very good shock absorbers, but it's about 45 days now. Most of those days we've been in that. It's a great moving billboard, and I can bring a lot of people.
Was that, what have you seen as you've been going out around the state in the Winnebago? I mean, I'll bet you have seen a lot of different aspects of the state, and certainly different aspects of the challenges that face the state as well.
Well, we have, and that was the purpose of it, starting in early August to do a tour of the state. It's a comfortable way, for the most part, to travel. It's got a microwave and a kitchen in it.
You're good to go.
But really what it does is allows us to get to places with press that want to travel with us to cover things, and we hit the first 30 days about 65 different cities and counties to just talk to business leaders, community leaders, go to events, talk to individual voters and groups and Kiwanis clubs and Rotaries about the issues that face them. And it's just been a great way to get around and ask people to look at my record and look at my issues and vote for me.
Well, that's part of what our conversation is about tonight. This is one thing we feel very strongly about, giving each candidate a 30-minute conversation to talk to the voters, to look through the issues, and look through the issues in a way that's sort of more than what sound bites would reveal. I had to chuckle by the fact that you were a little bit late for the interview today because of a problem at the tunnel. I thought, well, how marvelously ironic is that? And I wonder, you know, as you think about transportation, certainly this is a critical issue here in Hampton Roads and in Northern Virginia as well.
Right.
So what priorities do you have for transportation? And then that big question, how are we going to pay for it?
Yeah. Well, first, I appreciate you giving us this kind of format. This is great for a candidate to have a one-on-one sit down to talk in depth about the issues, not having to cram your whole message into 30 seconds. So thank you for that, and for WHRO for doing this. I grew up in Fairfax County, lived here for 21 years in Virginia Beach, raising all my kids. Now I live in the Richmond area, so I've lived in all those metro areas where we got the biggest congestion problems, where it affects the quality of life and affects the ability to attract business. We've got to make some changes. I helped to put together a compromise bill back in 2007 that made some progress, but we've got a lot more to do. And I've outlined, in fact, I'm the only candidate that actually has a transportation plan, and I've outlined in detail about 12 different funding mechanisms that we can use to pay for transportation, some reforms that need to be put in place with VDOT to have more accountability and get a better bang for our buck. But to me, it's a combination of bonds, public-private partnerships, the use of general funds, including surplus revenues and growth in revenues, and using some creative things, thinking outside of the box, like dedication of revenues from offshore drilling that we think will happen in 4 or 5 years, and also this privatization of our ABC stores. I mean, that's a way to do a lot of things, not raising taxes, to be able to generate money for transportation.
I want to come back to those funding mechanisms in a moment. I was checking out your website, and one of the things that you note is your priority projects, and all of the priority projects listed, at least in the short-term version, are in Northern Virginia. Perfectly understandable. They have a tremendous problem there. Where is Hampton Roads on that list? And realistically, how fast would projects in this area be part of the plan?
Well, there are projects in there clearly for Hampton Roads.
Without a doubt, you have to.
Route 460, the third crossing, the Midtown Tunnel, widening of 64, I think are all critical project. I think 460 is something I worked on a long time as a legislator here from Virginia Beach to try to get that project. I've been very disappointed with this administration. I think it's been too slow and too many excuses about why deals can't get done. That will provide another major route up to interstate quality in and out of Hampton Roads for the military, for the port, for hurricane evacuation. We've got to get that deal done. That'll be a top priority for me. And that's one that I think is completely susceptible to a public-private partnership. We had 3 proposals, but this administration hasn't been able to close the deal. I think that's unacceptable. We have to get better people at the table making this this work, and I think that's got to be done.
So then, priority-wise, were these projects that the Hampton Roads projects, could they be done parallel to those Northern Virginia priorities?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Public-private partnerships is one that's got unlimited potential, and 460 is probably the best example in the state of one that will work. It's 62 miles from Petersburg to Suffolk. It's over long rural stretches. It could be a toll road. People will be willing to pay to not, you have to use the traffic on, or enjoy the traffic on 64. So I've got some ideas to be able to provide some monies for a state match to bring down the amount of money the private sector's got to borrow so we can bring the toll level down, and that'll make it work. But that's going to be my top priority. And then some of the bonds that I've proposed will go to highly congested areas. That's Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia. I've recommended as part of our plan to have a portion of the increase in the revenues around the great port of Hampton Roads, enormous economic engine for the state, to stay right here in Hampton Roads. I mean, Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia don't fare very well under the current state funding formula. It's be a tough political battle to change the formula, but what we can do is sort of work around that for Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads to keep money raised here, right here in Hampton Roads.
You know, to that point, I know that you like the idea of a 0.3% sales tax, taking 0.3%, 1/3 of 1%. I'm not good with the math.
0.3 of 1%.
0.3 of 1%, thank you. And putting it in a dedicated transportation fund in Northern Virginia.
Right.
Would you look at something like that in Hampton Roads?
I would, and I only recommended an alternative for Hampton Roads, which was the special districts to capture revenue for increase in port revenues around the port, to keep that for Hampton Roads. The same concept, and I only picked that because that's something that Senator Stolley, Delegate Oder, and others have already embraced, had some ideas on how much money that would raise, so I picked that. But I would be certainly open to doing exactly the same thing. If it's raised here in Hampton Roads, keep a portion of it here, because this is where the traffic problems are, Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia.
And it's been very interesting to watch this evolve, or maybe devolve over time, depending on your perspective. We have the 6 projects for the region that were the priorities. Exactly.
Right.
And then late last year, there was the addition of the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, and a conversation about, well, if you'll support the 6, then we'll add the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel in there. As you look at those projects, what do you think about the priority of those? Because now they are starting to say, well, I guess we really can't do all 6 at once, because that hasn't gone so well for a number of years. We have to prioritize it. So as you look at that list, is there one that stands out for you?
And I understand from talking to the leaders at the MPO and the CTB many times that to be able to get a regional buy-in, you don't want to pick among the multiple priorities, because some are more important to Virginia Beach or Norfolk or Hampton, let's say, than others. So they said, look, we want to do them all, and here's a package to do all of them at once. In this down economy, and with very little public support for tax increases, and I'm not supporting tax increases in this tough economy where businesses and families are struggling, we've got to find other ways to do it. And the plan that I think the region have put together relied on tax increases and tolls, retolling the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, things like that may not work right now. I really think, for the benefit of Southampton Roads, because of the port and the hurricane evacuation issues, that 460 has got to get built. That'll be a top focus for me. But there's public-private partnerships for the third crossing that have been offered as well. The environmental work has been done. That one's ready to go. I think we've just got to do a better job finding some amount of state money to put in, so that we can make the amount of borrowing and the tolls lower on those projects, so that we can actually get them built. But listen, I believe that that's the top infrastructure need in the state, and that's why I've been willing to think outside of the box with offshore drilling and selling ABC stores. I mean, we've got to find some new, innovative ways to fund transportation.
Some of the people who have looked at your plan have said the ABC store sale will basically, I think one person said it would be giving away the goose that lays the golden egg. That would be very interesting in the short term, but in the longer term, it would cost the state money.
They're wrong.
Think about that? Alrighty then.
I mean, the 32 states have done this. It's not a plotting new ground. Governor Wilder actually recommended this to Governor Warner back in 2002, along with some other reforms, and said we could generate hundreds of millions of dollars. I want to get that up front in licensing of stores, put that into maintenance, highway maintenance. That's where we've got a big deficit. And depending on how you structure the deal, and there's probably 10 different ways to do it, Cathy, but I envision a way of maximizing the upfront money with a lease of, right now there's 386 stores. Maybe we have 400 or 450, whatever, some number that we could get a group together to figure out. And then secondly, is to create a revenue sharing stream so we don't lose the revenues. I think it can be a win-win in the long run by keeping revenues flowing to the state so we don't lose that revenue. But then we put some of these stores...
Because they would still be paying taxes.
Yeah, they'd still be paying taxes, but what they'd be paying that they're not doing now is private sector stores would be back on the tax rolls to pay local private real estate taxes that many of them aren't paying now, so it's a win for the localities. So other states have done this. The model's there. I completely reject the idea that this is not going to be a win. I think we ought to get the government out of the alcohol business anyway and not compete with the private sector and make the money that we need for transportation and keep the revenues flowing. I think it can be done right.
And realistically, how close are we to get, because the offshore drilling is an in the future sort of thing.
Sure, I agree.
Is it reasonable to really count on that? That's one of the concerns that people have had is offshore drilling's a long way away. Maybe the state recovers in the economy, maybe it doesn't.
Well, listen, there's a lot of people who are going to say we can't do this and can't do that. I'm a can-do person. When I get elected, I'm going to get people who have positive attitudes and are going to be results-oriented and get in place and find ways to get things done. I'm not going to accept excuses. Now, I've said that that portion of the plan will take a while to materialize, but my goal is to make Virginia the energy capital of the East Coast. We are set right now to be the first state on the East Coast to drill offshore. The moratoriums have expired. Moratorium have expired at the federal level. So we have a lease sale number 220 that's scheduled for 2011. And there have been a number of studies. Jim Cook, Dr. Cook at ODU did a study, the Thomas Jefferson Institute and others that have estimated that we will have billions in capital investment and hundreds of millions of dollars in royalties and new tax revenues and hundreds of thousands of new jobs that will come for drilling offshore for oil and natural gas. We know it can be done environmentally friendly. They do it in the Gulf of Mexico, been doing it for 30 years. And if we start in 2011 with the sale, and then the private companies begin to explore and drill within a couple of years after that, I would estimate within 4 or 5 years that money will start. But here's the problem, Cathy. You know the General Assembly. If you don't stake a claim right now to those revenues, once that money starts to flow, there'll be 10 other ideas on how to carve this up. And what I want to say is, look, transportation infrastructure is the most important infrastructure need we have. Let's claim it right now, before that money starts, that 80% of the money is going to transportation, and then 20% will go to green and alternative energy research, wind and solar and biomass, to help make those technologies commercially practicable. So some pieces of the transportation plan are in the out years, but the lion's share of them I anticipate getting done within the first year or two, so we can start making these changes for transportation.
I'm glad you mentioned energy, because one of the things that we're increasingly understanding about this region is there is an enormous number of energy companies really poised to do amazing things here in the region. So given that, is this region then, are you going to say that this region is the top priority to make Virginia the energy capital of the East Coast?
It could be, certainly with the offshore component, but I envision a comprehensive plan. I mean, my opponent's talking only about alternatives, which is 3%. We've got to use all of our resources. We've got more coal and natural gas than virtually any other state in the country. In Southwest Virginia, when the new technologies come online with carbon sequestration and alternative uses for natural gas, let's say to power cars, we're going to have an enormous boon in those industries to help Southwest Virginia. Nuclear power. We've got more private nuclear capacity in Virginia than any other state, with the Navy and Northrop Grumman and Dominion and Areva. And we need to permit these things faster at the state and federal level. We should build one of the next reactors in America at Lake Anna, Virginia. This area will be the epicenter, though, I think, for offshore drilling, and then with the boom in the coal industry, we're going to see growth in our great coal exporting port, the largest in the world for coal. So I look at this region benefiting enormously from my focus on energy. We got to use the resources we've got. It'll keep us out of perhaps some conflicts in the Mideast and make sure we can keep America as energy independent as possible. So I see Hampton Roads being a big winner with this focus on energy.
And as you look at the Port of Virginia, tremendous economic engine for the Commonwealth.
Yes.
What do you think about some of these proposals to privatize port operations? They're not to sell the port, we should be clear, but to privatize operations.
Well, it's one of the great assets in the state, the Port of Hampton Roads. Everybody knows that. The revenues raised by the port benefit the entire state, not just Hampton Roads. We get the benefit of jobs and so forth. I think we need to be very cautious in being able to lease that for 60 years. There's so many uncertainties. You know, in a decade, I predict this port will be the best port on the East Coast. The widening of the Panama Canal, the finishing of Craney Island, a rebound in the global shipping industry. this is going to be an enormous asset. It's going to be hard to predict what the value of that port is. And so I've got kind of a three-part test. One is, does it make sense under any circumstances to lease this tremendous asset knowing what we know now? Number two, is there tremendous value added by the private sector, whether it's a CenterPoint deal or there's 3 deals right now that have been proposed, that we can get dramatically increased investments in infrastructure and other synergies that we couldn't get alone. And thirdly, and most importantly, is the amount of money that they're offering now, is the net present value of that money dramatically or significantly superior to what we think we'd get if we kept it under state control down the road. If we can't say with great certainty yes to all 3 of those, then we probably shouldn't do it. But there's a lot of studies that are going to be done. Bob Perky's doing a study, the VDOT's doing a study. So we'll know in the next 6 months to a year all the data, and then I'll hopefully be involved with helping make a good business decision for Virginia. So
here we are in October, and at this point in the campaign, it looks like you have a great battle for women voters at this point. And I know you wrote a little thesis that people have been asking about and talking about. And I have to tell you that one of the things that I hear, and I go around do speaking and what have you, a lot of women ask me, they really want to understand what is going on with the thesis. They want to know, and this is how one put it to me, and I thought this was a very interesting way to put it, who is the real Bob McDonnell? Is it 1989 Bob McDonnell who wrote some things about women and feminism and all of the rest of it, or is it the 2009 Bob McDonnell? And how, if it's the 2009 Bob McDonnell, what sort of evolution in your thinking took place along the way?
You know, the thesis was about the notion that the family is the bedrock of society, and I think everybody from John Kennedy to Barack Obama to Bob McDonnell have agreed with that, and that government policies can do some things sometimes that are harmful to the family. And some of the things that came out of the Great Society of Johnson in the 60s and 70s were things that weren't good, particularly in the welfare era. So what I would say to people is, you know, everybody changes. Over 20 years, I've raised 5 kids, 3 daughters, and my views on some things have changed. And what I would say is, like, the best evidence is, what have I done for the last 20 years? I've been in office for 18 years. I've got tens of thousands of votes. I've been the Attorney General of Virginia. 90% of my bills passed with a bipartisan support. And here's what I would say on the issue of working women. When I became entrusted to be the Attorney General of Virginia, 5 out of the 10 deputies that I hired to manage the state's law firm were women, because I believed in them. Most of them had children. My wife has been a working woman for 33 years in and out of the home. My 2 oldest daughters I've encouraged to reach their highest and best, Cathy, and they've got master's degrees. My oldest daughter was a platoon leader in Iraq. I'd call her the ultimate working woman. I encouraged her to go in the military and to serve, and I'm very proud of her. So any indications that I gave, 20 years ago that I don't support working women certainly have not been borne out, not my view, and that's why we've got any number of talented working women involved with my campaign, and so that's who I am.
Can we, I want to just narrow to reproductive rights for a moment, because that's the other issue that some women are asking about.
Sure.
Abortion, opposed? You're opposed?
Yes, I've been pro-life. I was raised in a middle-class Catholic family. I believe that we ought to protect innocent human life, and throughout my time in the General Assembly, I try to find common sense things to do to limit the number of abortions. Partial birth abortion ban, parental consent. These are bills that passed overwhelmingly in the General Assembly with broad bipartisan support, Cathy, and my opponent was against those. So I really think, if you look at the record, he's outside of the mainstream on some of these common sense things that have passed in the General Assembly and have been embraced by Virginians.
I want to tell you one question a woman asked me. I thought it was very interesting. She said, I like this guy on transportation. I like what he's saying about state government. I like what he's saying right on down the line. I am scared to death that he will get in there and try to challenge my reproductive rights. This woman said, look, I am very much pro-choice. I think that's very important. I am scared to death that he is going to get in there, and that's what he's going to focus on.
I don't think people would expect me to change and be anything different than what I've been in the General Assembly, which has been a pro-life legislator. That's my view, and I have tried to work together with others, even those who disagreed, to find the common ground: parental notification, informed consent, parental consent, a ban on partial birth abortions. I think going forward we need to find ways to do more. Fatherhood initiative that President Obama's got is very good. promoting adoption to reduce the number of abortions, finding more ways to get women more information prior to making the decisions. I mean, those are the kind of things that I would promote. And so while I have my personal views based on my Catholic faith, I think, as I've proven time and time again, as Attorney General, as a legislator, I understand the law. The law of the land is what it is, and I will enforce the law as I did as Attorney General, but find ways that are bipartisan to try to find ways that most people say we should do to reduce the number of abortions. But I would tell the listener or the caller to say, look, I've been in office for 20 years. You can look at my record and what I've done, which has been some of these common sense and reasonable limitations that have passed with bipartisan support.
The other issue that's important to this community and the next governor of Virginia will have to deal with is Fort Monroe, right?
Yes,
there in Hampton.
right.
Gorgeous piece of property. Great debate now about what to do with it.
Right.
You have the FADA, which has the Federal Area Development Authority,
Yes.
which has a plan in place. There is also, as you know, a very active, because I'm guessing you've heard from them, a very active citizens group. It's very interested in seeing that become a national park.
Yes.
They really are looking for the next governor to pick up that mantle and try to get Fort Monroe to become a national park. And I wonder where you are on that issue.
Well, the reason that FM FADA, Fort Monroe FADA, was created was to be able to get a broad base of citizen input and local government input to be able to decide what does the community think is the best thing to do, and to have state input, because I was Attorney General during most of this conversion, and we actually discovered a 100-year-old case that basically said that most of that land reverts to the state when it's not used for the current use as the military. So we had a little legal battle with the military that's still not quite settled.
Yes.
But bottom line, I think we own 80% of the property, which means the state should be a primary force in deciding what the ultimate decision is. The FADA's done a lot of their work, and I suspect at the end of the day it's going to be a combination of park, historic preservation, development, recreation, significant public access to this hundreds of year old site that's been a marvelous part of American history.
But you're
for all that
supportive
time.
generally of the FADA plan.
From what I have seen of it, the final product that's gone now to the Department of Defense, it seems to have a number of elements that are good. I don't think it's going to be used 100% for a park or 100% for the development. It's going to have to be the combination of mixed use. And frankly, there's a lot of environmental issues that are a long way from being resolved that would preclude a fair amount of that from ever being used for development because of the incredible amount of cleanup. Yeah. So there's still issues, legal issues and others to resolve, but I really believe that we ought to try to help improve the tax base, but also help to create long-standing public access to enjoy the historic nature of that place.
It really is a spectacular place, truly.
Absolutely.
Well, we are about 2.5 minutes out now.
Okay.
And one of the things that I think is important for people to be able to do who are candidates for office is just to have 2 unmolested minutes to say what you want to say without interruption or question or anything else. So what I want to invite you to do is look over there at camera 1. Okay. We have 3 of them for your viewing pleasure. Okay. But look at camera 1 and just give 2 minutes pitch.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks, Cathy, for this opportunity. It's really great to have the dialogue and to be back here in my home of Hampton Roads, where I've lived for 21 years, raised all my kids. And I guess what I would say to the folks down here is I intend to use my experience as a retired Army officer, as a prosecutor, as a legislator, as the Attorney General of Virginia, a father of 5, a business manager, to be able to serve the citizens of Hampton Roads and Virginia well. I believe that the key to making us prosperous in the future is to maximize the opportunity and attract new businesses and small business and entrepreneurs to be able to grow in Virginia, because I think the job is the best hedge against any number of economic and social problems. So my heart and soul of my time as governor will be to promote job creation, and I'll do that by keeping taxes and regulation, litigation low, strong right-to-work laws, and great universities. And I'm really pleased in this race. I've been endorsed by all of the major business groups, the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce, the NFIB, a number of free enterprise groups. My opponent's basically been endorsed by the big national labor unions, so we have a very different view when it comes to protecting free enterprise. I'll also be a governor that'll stand up and do what's right for Virginia, whether it's a Republican or Democratic Congress. If it's bills like cap and trade and card check and unfunded mandates on Virginia businesses and families that don't help our competitiveness and free enterprise, I'm going to say that's wrong. If the Congress is right or the President's right on things like charter schools and merit pay, I'm going to work with them and say that they're right. And I hope that's the kind of leader people want to see. Long term, we've got to be able to improve our roads. We've got to get more access to our colleges at a lower tuition cost. Those have doubled over the last decade. We've got to find better ways to improve our schools with charter schools and more science and technology and engineering and math, more money to the classroom, less into bureaucracy. And I'm going to finally be a governor that's going to really look at innovative ways to get government working better. We've got $76 billion that we spend every couple of years. Businesses, families are very concerned about spending at all levels of government. I want to see performance audits. I want to see more consolidation, privatization, and ways to make government work better. So I asked my friends here in Hampton Roads to consider voting for me on November 3rd. I know the area. I'll be back many times. Thank you.
I see you took your rap cue well. Well done, Bob McDonnell. Thank you so much for being with us. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Great to be with you.
You know, the only thing that's tough about this, you feel like there's 18 subjects you never got to, even in a half an hour. So perhaps we'll have the opportunity to talk again. We've been talking with all the statewide candidates, including Senator Creed Deeds. He's the Democratic candidate for governor. If you want to view any or all of those candidate conversations, you can subscribe to our video or audio podcasts at itunes.com. And you can also see them at your leisure at our website, whatmatters.tv. You can drop us an email to whatmatters@whro.org. Join us on Facebook, and we'll be glad to send you a little e-bit every week to let you know what we're working on. On the radio, don't forget to tune in for Hearsay on 89.5 at noon, and we always look forward to having you in the conversation each weekday at noon. Thanks for watching. I'm Cathy Lewis, and we'll see you next time for another look at What Matters.